What's happening, y'all? Cowboy here, and welcome to my Iceborne Advanced Guide. Now, the reason we're calling this the Advanced Guide is because I already have an Iceborne Starter Guide, and I'm going to have a link to that in the description as well as pinned in the comments. And while that video focused on a lot of things that you should know going into Iceborne, a lot of beginner-friendly things, this video is going to focus on a lot more of the top-end efficiency, what type of gear you should be working on as you're playing Iceborne, what type of gear you're going to want to work towards as you progress through the game, and all in all give you a much better setup than you would have than going in blind. Now, this video will try to keep spoilers to a minimum for those that don't want to have monsters spoiled and whatnot, but because I'm going to be giving you information that's going to lead you to making, informed build choices and whatnot, there will be a couple spoilers. Either way, let's jump into it, and the first thing I want to discuss are early builds. Now, right here we have a pretty standard late game high rank build for someone that probably didn't do all of the Arc Tempered stuff. We got 4 pieces of Draken, we got the Dragon King eye patch, lots of standard DPS skills here: crit eye, attack boost, Wex, crit boost, master's touch. And while this is all fine and dandy and you'll do a ton of damage, what I want you to notice is your defense with this build is only at 489, and that's pretty damn low. Now, comparing this to a MR1 Master Rank build, and this is something that you can put together as soon as you get into Master Rank. We have 4 pieces of the Hornitar gear, and we have the Bo Greaves, Bo being one of the very early monsters in Iceborne. With this build, we still have a pretty high amount of crit eye, we have Wex, we have crit boost, and on top of that, we have earplugs at level 5, canceling out any roars that are going to be happening. So while we are going to lose some attack here, if you look at our defense is drastically higher compared to before. Our defense is all the way up over 800 now, and that's going to make a big difference in your survivability. You might be able to get through MR1, MR2 hunts with a late high rank set, but especially by the time you hit MR3, anytime a monster hits you, you're going to lose roughly half your health bar. Now, moving on from there, this is the standard build I would suggest for the majority of progression you're going to make in Iceborne. You can fully put this together at MR3. You're going to want the Rathalos chest, you're going to want the Odogaron coil, which you'll actually probably use that all the way to the end of the game because it's like a best in slot piece, and then 3 pieces of Nargacuga. 3 pieces of Nargacuga is going to give you access to true razor sharp and true spare shot. So whether you're a gunner or a blade master, this build is incredibly effective. We have our crit eye, we have our weakness exploit, we have some handicraft if the weapon needs handicraft to put it up into white, we have crit boost, and all in all, it's just a very solid build that's going to allow us to do a lot of damage while maintaining our sharpness through the majority of Iceborne content. Next, I want to take a moment to talk about weapons. Now, in Iceborne, you're going to be faced with 2 real choices, whether you want to do a physical-oriented build or elemental-oriented build. Elemental damage is incredibly potent in Iceborne now that the elemental caps have been greatly increased. Personally, I love doing elemental builds, but it's definitely not for every weapon. Some weapons are great at element, like dual blade, bow, charge blade. Other weapons, not so much. Now, if you want to do elemental, check the link that is down in the comment section as well as the description. That is going to be to the pre-Safi meta for Monster Hunter World Iceborne. You can select the weapon that you use and then go down and find exactly what weapon tree you should use for a particular element. But because there are so many different variables, for example, Beatodos is going to be top tier ice for dual blades as well as charge blade, but it's not going to do as much as, say, the Legiana bow when it comes to ice. So because of all those factors, I would suggest following up on that link. Now, for those that aren't interested in element and purely want to do physical damage, the first thing I'd recommend is going to be building yourself one of these, a Rathian weapon. Now, the reason for this is late game, the Rathian weapons are top tier, bar none. If you're looking for raw physical damage, the Rathian weapon will beat out pretty much every single competitor it has for quite a while because they're going to have very high attack, they're going to have some innate white sharpness on them, they're going to have affinity, they're going to have some poison on them, and just all in all, they are very solid weapons. However, if you're not going that route or you're not sure what you want to do, what I would recommend is just sticking with the basics, the Defender Katana. Now, I know the Defender weapons were added to help players kind of power through the base world content in preparation for Iceborne. Despite that, they're actually quite potent in early Iceborne as well, and a Defender weapon can easily get you through all of the MR1 and MR2 hunts. Using the Defender Katana as an example here, attack at 726, innate white sharpness, blast, and we have augments on it, so you can still run health regen. And I'm just going to go down the list and compare this to a couple of the other early MR weapons. You can see we beat this one on out, we beat this one on out. This one, we have more damage, but we lose out on affinity, but still got augments. Looking at here, I like the Wyvern Blade, but you're going to need Handicraft to get to that white sharpness. Right here, we have more damage, but once again, you're going to need Handicraft. Going down to Anjanath, more damage, but negative affinity, and you're going to need Handicraft. Going down here, I mean, you get the gist. These are all the weapons that you would make very early on in Iceborne, and in pretty much every case here, the Defender Katana is still an incredibly solid choice. So, to sum things on up, the Defender weapons are perfectly suitable to kind of break your way into Iceborne until you find a weapon you really like. If you want to focus on pure physical damage, I would suggest going down the Rathian line. And if you want to do Elemental, I would suggest following the link that is both in the description and in the comment section pinned. Now, on the note of progression, while I beat this Rathalos to death, we're going to talk about something that is more late game Iceborne, and that is the Guiding Lands, or as many players call it, the Grinding Lands. The Guiding Lands is the late game incentive in Iceborne. It's essentially a dynamic world that constantly has monsters going in and out, and you can hunt them for parts. However, initially there are going to be 4 biomes in the Guiding Lands, and depending on which biome you level will dictate which high-end monster you're going to receive. I'm not going to spoil these monsters, but as a general rule of thumb, if you level up the Forest region, you're going to get access to the best in slot pants in the game. These are pants that are used in almost every single build. If you level up the Rotting region, you're going to get access to the best chest in the game. Pretty much any raw DPS build is going to use this chest. If you want access to the best raw weapons in the game, you're going to want to level up the Wildspire region. The monster in the Wildspire is going to give you the mats for the final upgrade to raw weapons. And lastly, if you are going for elemental builds, you'll want to level up the Coral region first, because the monster from there gives you access to the best gear in the game for elemental damage builds. Next, we're going to take a moment to talk about the Clutch Claw, because the game actually has a built-in Clutch Claw tutorial that a lot of players just aren't aware of. So once you get into Iceborne, go ahead and go down to low/high rank, optional, 1 star, and right here you should have a mission called Learning the Clutch. Now if you don't have this, go ahead and talk to the blacksmith back in Astera. He should give you the mission, but we're going to go into this mission and show you some more in-depth things with the Clutch Claw that I feel are important to elaborate on. Now while the in-game Clutch Claw tutorial is fairly comprehensive, there are a couple things I'd like to cover. The first is guaranteeing a quick flinch so you can launch the monster. The second is knowing exactly when the monster is enraged so that you know when to not go for a wall bounce. And the third is clutch bombing. Now, as for the first, there's a couple different ways to launch the monster. Obviously, you could wait until it's actually flinched from being tired. You could, of course, also put on something like a temporal mantle or a rocksteady mantle to guarantee that you're not going to get thrown off. And the third is using the monster's own slinger ammo. Now, if you're running a light weapon, you can very easily get slinger ammo off the monster. If you're running a heavy weapon, you'll need to use something like, say, Scatternut or Crystal Burst. But this ammo in particular will briefly stagger the monster. And so what we're going to want to do is stagger the monster, clutch onto it, turn it before it can do an action, and then launch it into the wall. This is incredibly effective in terms of getting off those easy launches, and I've had, pretty much since I've started doing this, my Clutch Claw success has gone up dramatically. Now, as for telling when the monster is enraged, there are 2 main things I want you to look for. 1, the eye in the mini-map, which is currently yellow. 2, the heartbeat, which you can see is a steady blue. And the third is going to be the fact that Agitator hasn't activated. Now, in general, you can get 2 launches off before a monster will enrage. So right when we hit this, the monster gets back up, you'll notice Agitator is going to activate, that heartbeat monitor is going to turn, and that eye is also going to turn red. Now, any 3 of those are adequate methods of telling whether or not the monster is enraged. I'm just going to do a quick roar here and then be very angry. And we can say the skill Agitator has active. You can see the eye on the minimap has turned red, and in addition, the heartbeat is now much more rapid, and it's alternating between blue and orange. Until that heartbeat goes back down to just a normal blue, I will not be able to launch the monster no matter what I do. However, you can forcefully de-enrage a monster by putting it to sleep. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is clutch bombing. Now, typically when it comes to waking up a sleeping monster, one of the standard methods is simply stacking mega barrel bombs around its face and then blowing those bombs, getting damage in. Now, obviously, if you have something like a greatsword or a hammer, they are an excellent choice to wake up the monster. But what do you do when you don't? Well, typically you would just go on, put on out the bombs, and then shoot the bombs themselves so that the bombs detonate, doing damage. Now you can see I got 225 and 450 on those bombs. Now by comparison, this time we are going to do a clutch wake up. And what I mean by that is first we're going to sleep the monster, Once the monster is asleep, we're going to wake it on up and then send it flying into the wall, hitting some bombs. So the first thing we want to do is essentially get the monster in a good spot. So it's a bit of a far run, but we might be able to do it. So we'll put our bombs over here. And you'll notice that even though we're losing the 2-time wake-up bonus from that one bomb isn't going to be 450, we're going to actually get more damage between the wall bounce and the clutch claw together. So you can see 225 on each of the bomb and then 345 for the wall bounce. All in all, giving us more damage on that wake up. Now, obviously, if you are using something like Greatsword, you're going to get a much beefier hit than you could get otherwise. However, we're not all running Greatsword all the time. So maybe you have your Palico with the sleep weapon, maybe you're running light bowgun and you don't have a particularly good wake up. The point is, doing a clutch claw and then launching them into bombs is an incredibly valid way to wake the monster up while still getting respectable amounts of damage. Now, before we wrap up, there are 2 last things I want to discuss. The first being the Raider Ride mechanic that was added, which is incredibly underused despite how awesome it is, and the second being some overlooked decos. But the Raider Ride can be called in any region where you have fully completed the Palico related quest in that region, as in if you have the shield from Shieldspire, if you have the horn from Coral, as long as you've gone through that, and your Palico can, call in lesser monsters to come help fight, you can call them in and use them as mounts. And this is incredibly useful because while you're riding the monster, you can sharpen your weapon, you can drink potions, you can hit triangle or Y while you're on the monster, do a jumping attack and get a mount from it. And I see nobody using this thing. People still just run after monsters aimlessly. And this is, it's essentially an autopilot Uber that takes you to the monster. So definitely use them. And the last thing I want to discuss are 2 decorations that I see almost no one using despite how valuable they are. And the first is going to be Mire Walker. Especially when you're first playing through the game and you're going through Hoarfrost Reach, there are tons of areas that are just caked with snow and your character trudges on through them. Having a single point in Mire Walker is going to allow you to walk through all that snow like it was normal terrain. In addition, if you decide to take it up to level 3, you get a hefty evade window boost, which is actually quite significant. While this isn't something you're going to be all that worried about endgame, especially early on while you're exploring the region, it is incredibly helpful and nobody ever uses the thing. The second, and this is going to be for super late game, is going to be Geologist. Now, if you're wondering why I'm talking about a farming ability, it's actually because when you're in the Guiding Lands, at all times while you're hunting, almost no matter what, you are going to want to have 1 point of Geologist. And that's because the way the game is coded, shinies that drop from monsters in the Guiding Lands are considered bone piles. And because of that, Geologist causes the shinies to double. So what I mean is when you wall bounce a monster, instead of 1 shiny showing up, you get 2. When you break parts, instead of 2 shinies dropping off the monster, you get 4. This is probably a bug with the game, but it has been in Iceborne PS4 since launch. Despite all the patches that have gone through, it's still in the game. Capcom has to be aware of this thing by now, and for the foreseeable future, it's still going to work. So the point being that if you are in the Guided Lands and you are farming, put a single point of Geologist onto your build, and you will see so many shinies dropping off monsters that you'll have trouble keeping up DPS because you'll be too busy picking up things on the ground. So that is going to wrap things up for now. Hopefully this video helped you all get ready for Iceborne. If you're looking for more of a beginner guide, I once again will have that linked in the description as well as in the comment section. As a reminder, I'll also have a link to the meta post in addition to a couple different build builders, I guess you want to call them set builders, whatever you want to call them. That's the kind of stuff that I used to showcase those builds earlier. But either way, guys, thanks for coming on by. I appreciate all the support on this. Can't wait to dig deep on into some PC hunts, and I'll see you guys out there in the Hoarfrost Reach.